Hello, I am here with Don Durm, Vice President of Customer Solutions for PLM Fleet and one of our Lifetime Achievement Award winners from this year's Rockstars of the Supply Chain Award, presented by Food Logistics. Don, it's so great to see you again. Congratulations.
Oh, it's great to see you, Marina, and I'm very honored by this award. So much appreciated. Thank you.
Well, let's talk about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you got to this stage in your career.
Yeah. So way back when I was born in a little town called Ludwigsburg, Germany. Left as a baby. Grew up in the Baltimore, Washington D.C. area, and later on in high school moved to Orlando, Florida. Got my degree at Winter Park in Winter Park at Rollins College is where I went. Excuse me. Served in the military in the U.S. Army as a military police, and then when I got out of the service, I was a deputy sheriff for Orange County, Florida, and where I was there for about 9 years. From there, I went to PLM Fleet, and I built a 28-year career there, advancing in different roles: account manager, national account manager, regional manager, director of agencies. And where I'm at today is the vice president of customer solution. At an entry point when I came to the company, we did dry vans, flatbeds, and some refrigerating. And so the company was trying to decide what they were going to be when they grew up and as for a growth pattern. And so strategically, they went with all refrigerated trailers. So what I began to do is I began to connect with refrigerated fleet companies or distribution companies and asked if I could ride on their trailers to learn that business. And so, what I do to gain great insight by riding on these trailers, I called it a food service trailer needs analysis, and I would provide actually how supply chain worked for them. So, I looked at any operational efficiencies that they were doing. What I learned very early on is that it's great when it sits in a warehouse. It's great when it sits in the trailer, refrigerated trailer. It's the handoffs that can create the problems. So from that, I was really able to take a look at and really look at leasing programs that we were doing and understand that everything has a life cycle. And there's kind of a sweet spot for every business out there. And so we did a life cycle management, which is a little bit different than most leasing companies because they want to hold the asset for a period of time that's good for them, but it might not be good for their client. And so we kind of mirror the best leasing. So you want to, everything has a life cycle, it's going to break. So you want to get out of that equipment before those negative things start to impact you. Higher fuel cost for using more fuel, could be just compressors go and just different things like that that go on. So I progressed through many of those stages, like I told you earlier. One of the things that I'm currently doing is I'm the chairman of the Global Cold Chain Alliance Transportation. I sit on several other committees with GCCA and government affairs, international programs, and I sit on several other government affairs that deal with other trade associations like IFTA, GS1, AIM Global, BITA, Blockchain and Transportation. And I'm a frequent speaker today at different conferences on different subjects like zero emissions, supply chain transparency and efficiencies, and also along that line, technology.
So, one of the things outlined in your submission form was your work with both the government and the industry on navigating regulatory rules and bringing safe foods to the consumer using industry best practices. Walk us through what this entails.
Yeah, so I first got involved many years ago when FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization, came about. And so there was a lot of disruption in industry about how we can actually comply with this. If you've ever heard me speak about the FSMA rules, it's Food Safety Modernization Act. I always say there was nothing modern about this. It should have been called the Food Documentation Act because what they want to do is to document what you were doing in supply chain and then retain records for that. So it should have been something like that, is what I was feeling. Um, and even within the rule, it talked 33 times throughout the rule, it talks about utilizing best practices. Well, for my years of riding on refrigerated trailers, working at different companies, looking at supply chain efficiencies, I knew that everybody had best practice, and it was their own. And so there was no universal best practices that was going on. At the time, the Global Cold Chain Alliance was actually working on such a document. They brought in the scientific community. They brought warehousing in. They brought transportation. They were all got together in a room, and I contributed, was one of the authors of that particular document. So that's called the Refrigerated Transportation Best Practice Guide to Meet Compliance for the Sanitary Transportation of Food Act. And that's the one that we were most concerned with. Um, from that, I was got to be known actually even within FDA, and was actually invited by them to be part of their New Era of a Smarter Food Safety workshop that they did. So I participated in that. They actually asked me to give public testimony, which I did, and continue to engage in that as we build out food safety and transportation, how we all play in that in those roles. During the pandemic, I was consulted by Operation Warp Speed because it was they were trying to get the vaccines to the consumer. Um, Additionally, after the pandemic, the main wave come in, President Biden tasked USDA with actually coming up with how to build a more resilient supply chain within due to the pandemic. And so I was asked to give some comments to that. Some of those comments were used, got over to Congress, and I actually spoke in front of a joint House and Senate Agriculture Committee meeting, and where we talked about how to build a resilient supply chain utilizing technology in there. So those are some of the things I've done. I've worked with California under CARB for zero emissions and what all the requirements that are due there. I currently do a lot of education. The biggest rule that's coming down that's facing supply chain is the 204 rule for enhanced traceability for certain foods. If you're not aware of this right now, if you have not done a gap analysis, you need to reach out. This is going to hit industry, and I just don't think industry is prepared for all of the opportunity that's going to hit their shores. This is FDA's now attempt to modernize the supply chain, and you will have to get on board with this one. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. I've also provided some guidance while traveling the world. I've been asked by GAIN, the Global Alliance of Improved Nutrition. So this is a organization, Swiss based, that was created and announced during the UN meeting. And what they do is obviously it's the global applied nutrition. So they're looking for that. What they found out, they've got enough food in the world, they just can't get it to them. And the fact is that 40% of our food is wasted. And even in these countries that they're growing this food, they grow in, like for instance, Nigeria, they grow 3 tomatoes and 2 rots in distribution. So cold chain can actually help with that to be able to get good nutritious food to the consumer. It's my role. And I'll just mention this one more. My role is chairman of the Global Cold Chain Alliance and Transportation. I work very closely with Lowell Randall at GCCA in government affairs and legal, and really to advocate for cold chain throughout the world. Because the fact is that our food, we think we buy locally, but the average food on your table comes 1,500 miles away, and that's the average. And so those are some of the international engagements that I've done. I've worked in China, I've worked in Bangladesh, Pakistan. I've done projects in Pakistan, just to name a few.
So there's so much going on in the supply chain space, as you know. What else that you haven't covered have you and your company done to help customers improve visibility and optimization?
Yeah, so I think the very first one, the foundation of the company was life cycle management. Really to look at a customer and say, you have a certain life cycle. This is the optimal time to keep this particular asset for. What that does is save the customer time and money because as a unit gets older, it becomes maybe less efficient, not really working for you. Maintenance, even though we're taking care of the maintenance covered under our program, it just doesn't really fit. You also may have contracts that, so say it's a 5-year contract, and you don't need an asset for 8 years. So that takes risk out of the business. So those are some of the things that we did early on to really optimization goes. The other thing that we're doing today is I mentioned a little bit about zero emissions. So we are on the cutting edge of providing zero emission, all refrigerated trailers that doesn't have a fuel tank on it. It has a battery pack. We may have some that have solar panels on the top, wheel generating technology to supply more energy to the unit to run. So these are some of the things that we're working with. We work very closely with CARB, California Air Resource Board, and we have a whole team that's dedicated because it's not just buying or getting the asset, the refrigerated trailer, and then plugging it in. It's like, what's the infrastructure? What do I need? How do I pay for this? How do I get grant money? So we have a team that's dedicated for that. That kind of wraps all that up so you can get it. We can deploy certain vendors that can actually build and bid out those projects for you. So you're not having to do all that. We do all that in house. So the next thing I would say, as far as visibility that you talked a little bit about, one of the first things is that PLM was the first refrigerated trailer leasing company to get involved in advanced telematics. And what I mean by is that we just don't locate the trailer and follow it as a dot on the map. We actually pull all this information, temperature, your fuel. It's very interesting. Some people who aren't in the industry think there's a gauge inside the cab that tells them how much fuel is in the tank of the refrigerated trailer, but it's not. It just goes off. And sometimes the driver, it's noisy. He may not even know that the refrigeration unit went off. And so we're able to we can automate a lot of things. If your driver went out of the route, if you set up so you can manage by exception. So that way, if your temperature is off for more than 20 minutes, out of range, you want to note back to your dispatcher to be able to do that. So visibility of the asset with real-time data coming in was important. I guess the most exciting thing that we've got right now over at PLM is PLM Trust Link. And that is a SaaS program that actually digitizes food in the supply chain. It's very unique in that we can track and trace all the way through supply chain, and we can enter supply chain at any point and create real operational value in there. And the big key to this is really built for driving cost out of the business because it's a theme that runs throughout PLM, saving time and money. And then the other thing is regulatory compliance, that the 204 rule that we've been just chit chatting a little bit about is really important. So those are some of the things that we've done in the visibility range.
If you could have a conversation with your younger self, what would you tell him?
You know, that's a really, really good one. And, I would really say master more marketing and networking, okay, early on in the career. um, you know never discount the power of social media. Marina, I go to conferences much like you, and you're out there on social media, and it is surprising that when you don't even know people and they walk up and they talk to you like they know you, right, and they
Be
do know you. They do
recognized.
know you, and you're just trying to think like, okay, did I do how do I know this person? And we're just having this conversation. I'm thinking, did we go to school together or whatever? But that's the power of social media, to put things out there. Not everything's going to be a golden nugget, right? I mean, some land sideways, but people get to know you through that. And I would say also, what? I would find a mentor earlier in my career and then follow, tackle big problems. Don't get involved in all the little small ones, in the beginning. Let's go after big ones and create big results.
And then what would you tell your future self?
Yeah, so interesting because people always ask me, you should write a book. And I would ask myself, did you write that book? Okay. And then I would follow up with a question, why haven't you started yet?
Fair enough. Well, I'll make sure to ask you next time I see you if you've started it. So you've been named one of our lifetime achievement winners from this year's Rockstars of the Supply Chain Award. What advice do you have for others who've been in the industry for quite some time, and even for those up and comers in the supply chain?
Yeah, so I would definitely say the power of thought is asking yourself questions. Okay? If you want better answers, ask better questions. Don't get involved in the small trivial things. The power of the question, when you ask, you're subconsciously you have to answer that question. And you can, really seek out better solutions for what you're looking at. I would also say where your focus goes, your energy will flow. And so, really focus on the important problems. And again, trivia things, just get away from them. Just just hit the big ones. And then finally, I would say always strive to be a servant leader. Um, in any type of relationship that you have out there, always always give more value than you expect to receive. And I've found that you will get much more back than you even expected.
Don Durm, Vice President of Customer Solutions for PLM Fleet and one of our Lifetime Achievement Award winners from this year's Rockstars of the Supply Chain, presented by Food Logistics. To learn more about Don, go to foodlogistics.com.